Everyone thinks a modern jet needs a catastrophic failure to fall out of the sky. But one small metal vane proves otherwise. It forced the nose down again and again. Brake time equals 0, 6 is / and 346 people died across 2 crashes. The 737 MAX was Boeing's best-selling jet ever. Thousands were ordered before it even flew. Then 2 crashes months apart killed 346 people. They grounded roughly 380 aircraft worldwide for 20 months. The obvious guess is pilot error. It isn't. This is the story of how one $2 sensor and the software that trusted it brought down a flagship program. Start with the engines. Airbus had just launched the A320neo, a re-engined jet that sipped less fuel. Boeing needed an answer fast. The cheapest answer was to bolt bigger, more efficient engines onto the existing 737. These were the LEAP engines. Here's the problem. The 737 is an old design that sits low to the ground. Its landing gear is short. The new engines were fatter than the old ones. They simply would not fit underneath in the usual spot. So Boeing moved them. They mounted the big engines higher up and further forward on the wing. And that one move changed how the airplane flies. Think about the nose of a plane pointing up as it climbs. The angle between the wing and the oncoming air has a name: angle of attack. Pitch the nose too high and the wings stop working. That's a stall and it's deadly. On the MAX, the new engine position created extra lift at the front during steep climbs. That extra lift tended to push the nose up even higher, on its own, toward that dangerous angle. In plain terms, the plane had a subtle new habit. Under hard maneuvering, it wanted to point its own nose skyward. A test pilot could handle it, but it flew differently from every 737 before it. And that raised a very expensive question for Boeing. That expensive question: how do you sell a plane that flies differently without making airlines pay to retrain every pilot? Retraining is brutal money. If the MAX handled unlike the old 737, regulators could demand costly new certification. They could require hours of simulator time for thousands of pilots. Airlines hate that. It's the reason many bought the MAX in the first place. Same plane, same crews, no new paperwork. So Boeing solved the handling quirk in software instead of metal. They added a program with a mouthful of a name: the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS. Forget the name. Here's what it did. When the plane's nose crept too high, MCAS quietly nudged it back down by moving the tail, automatically without the pilot asking. The whole point was invisibility. Make the MAX feel exactly like the 737 pilots already knew. If the software smoothed over the new habit, then on paper nothing had changed. No new trainings. No new type ratings. Airlines keep their cheap, familiar fleet. Now, how did MCAS know when the nose was too high? It watched the angle of attack. That same angle between the wing and the air. When that reading climbed toward a stall, MCAS decided it was time to push down. A sensible idea. A safety system in theory. But everything depended on that angle reading being correct. Feed the software a true number and it protects you. Feed it a lie and it fights you. So the entire safety net now hung on one input. Which brings us to a chilling detail about where that number came from. Here's the detail that turns a design choice into a tragedy. The 737 MAX carries 2 angle of attack sensors, one on each side of the nose. They are small spinning vanes that measure how the air hits the plane. 2 sensors. Basic safety logic says, read both, and if they disagree, trust neither and warn the crew. That's redundancy. It's how you survive a broken part. MCAS didn't do that. It read from only one sensor at a time. No cross-check. No second opinion. If that single vane iced up, got knocked, or was installed wrong, it could report the nose was pitched dangerously high when the plane was flying perfectly level. And MCAS would believe it. Completely, brake time equals 0, 6 is / one faulty $2 part, and the software would start shoving a healthy airplane toward the ground, convinced it was preventing a stall. Now the part that's hard to forgive. Pilots were largely never told MCAS existed. It wasn't in their manuals in any meaningful way. It wasn't in their training. Boeing had built a system with the power to repeatedly push the nose down. Then they left the people flying the plane in the dark about it. Think about that from the cockpit. The nose suddenly dives. You pull back. It dives again. You pull back again. And nothing in your training even names the thing doing it to you. You're fighting an opponent you can't see that you were never told was on board. A single hidden input wired to a system nobody warned you about. It was a trap waiting for one bad reading. In October 2018, it got one. October 29, 2018. Lion Air Flight 610 takes off from Jakarta. Almost immediately, one angle of attack sensor is feeding garbage. A false sky-high reading. MCAS wakes up. It decides the nose is too high, so it pushes down. The captain pulls back and recovers. Then MCAS fires again. Pushes down again. The pilots pull back again. Over and over more than 20 times, the software shoves the nose toward the sea. The exhausted crew hauls it back. They didn't know what MCAS was. They only knew the plane kept trying to dive. 12 minutes after takeoff, MCAS 1. Flight 610 hit the Java Sea at high speed. All 189 people aboard were killed. Boeing and regulators pointed to the sensor and to maintenance. The MAX kept flying. Then it happened again. Break time equals 0. 6 is /March 10, 2019. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 lifts off from Addis Ababa. A bad angle readings. MCAS activating. The same nose-down commands, the same desperate tug-of-war in the cockpit. This crew had actually heard about MCAS after the first crash. And they still couldn't stop it in time, because the emergency steps didn't fully work at high speed. 6 minutes after takeoff, Flight 302 dove into the ground. All 157 people aboard were killed. 2 nearly identical crashes. Same aircraft, same sensor, same hidden software. 346 people dead in under 5 months. This was no longer a coincidence anyone could explain away. And that broke the world's trust in the airplane all at once. After the second crash, the trust collapsed fast. And notice who moved first. It wasn't the country that built the planes. China grounded the MAX within a day of the Ethiopian crash. Other regulators followed in a rush. Europe, Australia, Indonesia, one after another. The FAA, America's own aviation regulator, was the last major authority to act. They grounded the MAX days later in March 2019. By then it had little choice. And then the airplane just stopped. Every 737 MAX on Earth was parked. That grounding lasted about 20 months. One of the longest for a modern airliner in history. Picture roughly 380 brand new jets sitting silent on tarmacs for nearly 2 years. Now the reckonings. Investigators dug into how MCAS got approved in the first place. According to official investigations, the reviews faulted the single sensor design. A life-or-death system with no backup. They also faulted how MCAS was hidden from pilots and downplayed to regulators. Reports pointed to the pressure to keep costs and training low. Boeing faced enormous financial consequences. It was fined and reached a settlement with the U.S. Justice Department worth around $2.5 billion, according to that agency. Orders were canceled. Its reputation cratered. But money and paperwork don't answer the real question everyone was asking. How do you actually fix a plane that trusts a single lie? Because until you answer that, nobody's getting back on board. Here's how the whole mechanism finally clicks. Remember the master flaw, one input trusted blindly hidden to save money. The fix attacks exactly that. First, Boeing rewired MCAS to read both angle of attack sensors, not one. Now it compares the two vanes. If they disagree by too much, MCAS assumes something is broken and shuts itself off, instead of trusting a lie. That's the redundancy that should have been there from day one. Second, they clipped its power. MCAS can no longer fire over and over. It can't push the nose down as far, so a runaway can't stack up into an unrecoverable dive. Third, pilots were finally trained on it. No more invisible system. They now know it exists and how to switch it off. Step back and see the real lesson. This was never one broken vane. It was a single point of failure that no one built a backup for. Wired to software with too much authority. Concealed to dodge the cost of retraining. Fix the redundancy, limit the authority, tell the pilots. And the trap disappears. Regulators recertified the MAX, and it returned to passenger service in late 2020. So that's the mechanism. One small sensor, plus software that trusted it without question, grounded an entire fleet and cost 346 lives. The metal was fine. The judgment around it wasn't. But the crashes were only the beginning of the story. The fallout hit boardrooms, courtrooms, and regulators next. How did a $2 part expose a broken relationship between a plane maker and the agency meant to check it? That's the next box we'll open.